Hello class, good morning. So our lesson for today is the introduction to literature. So how do you define literature? Literature is the art of discovering something extraordinary about ordinary people and saying with ordinary words something extraordinary, according to Boris Paternak. So, literature is our connection with our human experience of life. It is the creative representation and reproduction of what we have lived in and for. It describes, records, and share our experiences, hopes, and desires to other people. It is us speaking when we are out of words. An essay could be you analyzing the different issues in society. The novel could be your subconscious retelling the memories you have suppressed. The poem could be your emotions flowing out of your body. Literature could be from the Latin word literatura, which means writing form letters. However, literature is not only enclosed in that meaning. Literature is everything and anything that reproduces life experiences. It collects, organizes, and sums up the entirety of humanity, occasionally adding to it. Literature of all kinds could be read and analyzed by looking carefully at its most basic element. So the elements of the literature will be discussed to Miss Rona May.
Good day class, so I am Miss Rona and for today's lesson, I will be discussing the four basic elements of literature. So these are form, theme, characterization, and style. So the first element is the form. So form talks about the general structure of the literary piece. It is the first aspect of literature that attempts to connect with the reader. So from the title of the literary work to the way the words or sentences create a visual impact, every part of its literature. So therefore, this is the truth of the form that literature first communicates its message. So the next element is the theme. So it is the subject of which the literature revolves around. Literature is purposive. So it draws in a crowd of readers who have the same reasons and goals. So it unites people who share common life experiences. So the third element is the characterization. So characters in literature could be products of the writer's imagination or they could be the very compelling point of view that the writer thinks in. So great characterization is achieved when one drops his or her stereotypical views of the world, grabs the more relatable and vulnerable personas that stands out. And lastly is the style. These are specific techniques and designs that the literary writers employs to prolong his or her grip of the reader's interest. So the play on words and the skills in storytelling of the writer comprise of his or her style. It is through the individual efforts of writer to improve and develop their style that literature continues to live even in this reality of the modern age. So the next topic will be tackled by Miss Julina Niepes.
Let's proceed to the types of literature, the fiction and non-fiction. So fiction, it features imaginary character and events, and the examples for this are short stories, novellas, and novel. While non-fiction, it tells the story of real people and events. The examples include biographies and journalism. On the other side, there are also common forms of literature across types, such as a drama, which is performed and witnessed by an audience. In our history, we have first performed this in a theater, but now we can watch this through TV shows, radio, as well as through our phone by the use of internet. And one of the popular drama in our country is Darna and Jezebel. Next is the novel, which is organized in chapter and sometimes volumes. The famous novel in the Philippines are No Limitangere and El Filibusterismo in 1896, which is written by Dr. Jose Rizal, as well as Florante at Laura, which is written by Francisco Baltazar. And the next one is short story. So in Tagalog, maikling kwento. It is a story narrated in brevity. An example for this is We Filipinos Are Mild Drinkers by Alejandro Rosas, published in 1940. The next one is the poetry, which uses more expressive words like figures of speech and creative structures. In the Philippines, Nico Joaquin is one of the best and legendary poet and author who wrote the poem entitled The Martyr. And the next one is an essay, a literary form intended to be read. I know that we are very familiar of an essay since we have done and write this at school most of the time, especially in English and Filipino subject. And lastly is the epic. It combines both styles of drama and narrative story. It also has an element of song. An example for this is the life of Lamang, one of the most popular folk epic story in the Philippines.
Good morning everyone, I'm Ibi Galanza and I'm here to tackle about contemporary form of literature. Contemporary form of literature. The use of the internet as a medium to showcase literature has helped create different literary types involving web sharing and reading. The context of the fast-changing period of the 21st century has also contributed to the creation of shorter but detail-filled literary text. Hyperpoetry, sometimes called cyberpoetry, presents poems that include verses or lines linked through hyperlinked markups. This type of poetry is very visual, as it oftentimes uses graphics to further convey the meaning. The length of this type of poem suggests that the reading of the poem is highly dependent on the readers, as they are ones clicking the links in the markups. Blog or weblog is a website created to contain and message user-made articles or posts that are updated regularly. This is a good medium for writers to share their opinions and experiences to a bigger audience, and at the same time, it is a good channel to read other ideas as well. Textula is a poem produced and shared through the use of a mobile phone's messaging application. Usually, these poems are in the form of a tanaga, a Filipino poem consisting of 4 lines with 7 syllables each with a rhyme scheme of AABB. The developed textula freely uses other dual rhyme schemes or freestyle rhyme scheme forms. Chiclet is a genre of fiction that generally talks about women and their different struggles, specifically staged in modern times. Themes in this writing genre are treated humorously and lightly. Speculative fiction. It is a fiction genre that dwells on issues and alternate imagine the scenarios. It uses the appeal of conspiracy themes, fantasy, science fiction, and dystopian societies to create imaginative stories. Flash fiction. It is a fiction genre that presents one sitting long of reading text. The longest text in the genre of flash fiction is only said to be 1,000 words.
Hello class, I am here again to continue our discussion, which is about the Philippine literature. So, in pre-colonial period, early times in 1564, the first period of the Philippine literary history is the longest. The long time before the Spaniards and other foreigners landed on Philippine shores, our forefathers already had their own literature, stamped in the history of our race. So the first literature in pre-colonial period is the riddles or bugtong. So it is a battle of wits among participants. And then next is the proverbs or the salawikain. So it is a wise sayings that contain a metaphor used to teach us a food for thought. And then next is the tanaga. So, the Tanaga is an indigenous Filipino poem traditionally in the Tagalog language, and one stanza poems consisted usually of 4 lines with 7 syllables and all lines rhyming. So next is the folk songs. It is one of the oldest forms of Philippine literature that emerged in the pre-Spanish period. So the examples are the Hili or Oyayi. It is a lullaby song. Next is the Ambahan. It is in Mangyan and about human relationship and social entertainment. And then next is the Kalusan in Ivatan. It is a work songs. And then Tagay in Cebu and Waray. It is a drinking song. And then Kanugan in Cebuano. It is a song of lamentation for the dead. So next is the folktales myths. So this folktales myths, it explains how the world was created, how certain animals possess certain characteristics, why some places have waterfalls, volcanoes, mountains, flora, and fauna. And then next is legends. It explains the origin of things. And then next is the fables. So a short tale to teach a moral lesson, and it is often used animal characters and allegory. So next is the fantasy stories. It deal with underworld characters such as Chanak, Aswang, Capre, and so on. So the last one is folktales. It is made up of stories about life, adventure, love, horror, and humor, where one can derive lessons about life. So that's all the literature in pre-colonial period. So next period is the Spanish colonization period that will be tackled to Miss Rana May.
Hi class, so in continuation, I will be discussing the literature during the Spanish colonization. So Spanish colonization of the Philippines started in 1565 to 1863. So during the time of Miguel de Legazpi, the first Spaniard governor general in the Philippines. So during his time, literature started to flourish. Spanish occupied Philippines in early 150th century. So the Spanish colonization period has two distinct classification, the religious then the secular. So religious literature involves religious lyrics written by Ladino poets, or those verses in both Spanish and Tagalog were included in early catechism. So while secular literature, it is the non-religious literature. So I have here some example of secular literature. So first is the awit. So awit is the colorful tales of chivalry made for singing and chanting. So example is the Ibong Adarna. So next is the corredo. So it is the metrical tale written in octosyllabic quatrains. So example for this is the Florante and Laura. So last is the prose narratives written to prescribe proper decorum. So during Spanish colonization period, they have also written and oral literature. So oral literature, it is the songs, religious drama, or the drama itself. Next is the songs. It is the composition for voice and voices performed by singing. Next is the kundiman. It is the Filipino love song traditionally sung by a man courting the woman of his dream. Example for this is the Leron Leron Sinta. This song depicts humbleness. Next is the religious drama, setting forth events recorded in the Bible or moral lessons to be drawn from religious teaching. In addition is the drama. It is enacted in front of live audiences. It is also known as play. Next is the short stories. It is a brief work of literature. And lastly is the poetry. So it is an imaginative awareness of experience expressed through meaning, sound, and rhythmic language. So that's all for the literature during Spanish colonization period.
Period of emergence, 1920 to 1930. Short stories, most prevalent literary form. So, the best known magazines that capitalized on short stories and poems were 1922, Liwayway or Tagalog, 1930, Bisaya or Cebuano, 1934, Hiligaynon or Ilonggo. Japanese colonization period, 1946 to 1960. Filipino poetry. So during this period were romantic and revolutionary. Filipino songs. Many Filipino songs dealt with themes that were really true life, like those of grief, poverty, aspirations for freedom, love of God, of country, and of fellow men. Contemporary modern period, 1986 present. Things that were used and exercised during the contemporary period are: first is onomatopoeia, the use of words that instate the sounds associated with the object or actions they refer to. Second is messages in poetry. This is the idea about life that a poet writes about is called the theme or message of the poem. The last is free verse, a poem that has no regular rhyme or rhythm.